Welcome to another episode of Fans of Motion, the Ultimate Night Ranger podcast. Joining me today is Mr. Troy Shaw of Shaw Time Productions. Troy has just finished a great documentary on a former Night Ranger member, David Zychek. The documentary is called Z, the story of David Zychek, premiering November 12th. Troy, thank you for joining us, buddy.
Thanks for having me. We really appreciate it.
No, it's great having you on. And for those that don't know the whole history of Night Ranger, back when Jack Blades was with Damn Yankees in the early '90s to the mid '90s, Night Ranger was out touring. Kelly Kagi, Brad Gillis, and they had Mr. Gary Moon with them. And in 1995, they did a summer tour, a fall tour, a winter tour, and they also released the Feeding Off the Mojo record in October '95. And during that recording and that tour, guitarist David Zychek was with the band. So many of you probably have memories of seeing Night Ranger at these rock clubs back then. And David Zychek was that fourth guy there on stage with him. So we're going to get a little bit of a history lesson of just who David was in this documentary that's coming out that Troy and his wife Anna wrote and produced. And so let's start with this, David. What was your career and where did you and David Zychek cross paths for the first time?
Well, I met David probably 97 or 98 because I had a band at the time and we were looking for a studio around Waco to record some songs. And at that time, he had a recording studio at Lone Star Music upstairs. Calvin Ross, who's in the documentary, he owned that music store. And I don't remember how. It's funny, I don't even remember the first time meeting David Zychek, but I just remember hearing his name. I didn't know who he was. I didn't even know he had just like finished a tour with Night Ranger a couple of years prior.
Mhm.
So somehow we met him, and he gave us some examples of some of the work he had done, and we listened to it. And then by the time we were going to record with him, he had already left that recording studio and then moved out to Ronnie Griffin studio out in China Spring. And we went out there and recorded an album. I think this was 98. And over from 98 to 2005, uh, the bands that I were in, we recorded like four albums out there. So we became good friends with David. I did his website for the recording studio. I did a website for his band he had back then called Dead Heart Beating. And so, and he wasn't too far from where we lived in China Springs. So, we became friends and just kind of through the music business. And everybody in Waco knew David. I mean, he was the man for many, many years around here.
Mhm.
And especially when he came off that Night Ranger tour, everybody in Waco was like, yeah, David toured with Night Ranger. Everybody thought that was really cool. But I didn't know that history about him at that time. So yeah, I guess from 98 to 2005, worked with him quite a bit and then sort of lost touch with him because I'd moved to the other side of town. Would still go see him play every once in a while. But I think it was 2010 or 2011, he was working with Deborah Jones, who lived in London. They were doing some recording together. And all this is in the documentary.
Mhm.
And my wife and I went on to produce, I guess, three or four, maybe five music videos for them at that time. So, you know, we were always seeing him play. We just became good friends over, almost 20 years till he passed away in, 2016, I guess.
So, I mean, so when he passed away, was it something, not to get into specifics, but something that was, expected, unexpected? I mean, he was in his 60s, right? I mean,
Yeah, he had been diagnosed with some kind of cancer.
okay.
And so, yeah, it took a turn for the worse pretty quick. He went from looking like a healthy guy to like,
Mhm.
lost a lot of weight, and they had a benefit. It was his last show that he did. They had a benefit for him out here right outside of Waco. This was on December 2nd because I remember it's my son's birthday. So we went out there, and yeah, I was shocked to
Yeah.
see, the way he looked. It was pretty sad, but and actually have a little clip of that performance in the documentary too.
Because he ended up passing away in March of 16.
Yeah, 2016. Yeah.
So, that would probably only been 2 or 3 months, after
Well,
that.
he had this. So me and my friend Dave, we started a podcast. Wasn't even really a podcast at that time. It was just audio, and we put it on YouTube.
Okay.
And 2015, we started it. And the reason I wanted to start it, one of the reasons was I just wanted to get, you know, talk to local musicians. At that time, we were just talking to local musicians, but I wanted to interview David Zychek because even though I had known him all these years, there was a lot of things I didn't know about it because
Mhm.
he never bragged about anything. I
Yeah.
probably knew him for, you know, 3 or 4 years before I even realized what a badass guitar player he was. Because he was just when I first met him, he was just doing, production,
Hmm.
audio production. So I wanted to interview him because I wanted to get his story down. Because I'd heard things from other people that he was an airborne and all this stuff. So we brought him in, I think in February of 2015, and we interviewed him for an hour and a half, something like that. It's a two-parter. It's on our In the Shed
What's it
YouTube
called? In the
In the
shed?
Shed. Yeah, In the
Okay.
Shed with two D's. So we interviewed him, and then it wasn't long after that. I remember he called me. I said, what's going on, Dave? He goes, well, I'm in the hospital. I said, well, how come? He goes, well, they said I have diverticulitis. And I'm like, I don't even know what that is. I had never heard of diverticulitis. And he said, yeah, I'll be fine, blah, 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 blah. And by the summer of 2015, he was already looking a little,
Yeah.
you could tell he wasn't healthy. And he was doing all these juices, and he was trying to keep himself self healthy without really going to the doctor and trying to get medicine or whatever. And what's really crazy is he never really told anybody he had cancer. The Ronnie Griffin who owned the studio out there in China Spring, he told us when we interviewed him, he's like, he never came out here and said he had cancer. Yeah, like a lot of people didn't even know until the day he died, I guess.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's pretty sad.
Well, it's
But
it's
but we
it,
but my point of my story is like we interviewed him in 2015 because I wanted to get his story down,
story.
and we use little clips of our interview with him in the documentary because he tells stories about,
Mhm.
he tells some Night Ranger stuff, and he tells some, when he was the airborne days.
Yeah. So when he passes away in March of 16, what's the genesis of creating this, documentary that it's, coming out here in November? What was that spark?
Well, I was when he had passed away, I was asked to do like uh, the video that they show at the funeral.
Hmm.
It was a video of him playing acoustic, playing this song, and then I showed like video clips and that I wouldn't say that actually started the thing, but after the funeral, my wife goes, "Hey, why don't we do a documentary on David Zychek? We have all this footage from all the music videos that we've done. I'm sure we can get some other footage from people, some pictures or whatever." And I said, that's a great idea. So that's kind of what we did, and we started interviewing people. And at first, we thought, well, we're just going to interview local people. We'll interview some local musicians that played with David. And then they would say, hey, you talked to so and so. I'm like, no, didn't know he was really part of anything. So it's crazy how this project led us to all these different people, like the guys from Night Ranger, Beau Hill, who produced like Ratt and Warrant and stuff back in the 80s. We interviewed Vic Johnson, who plays with Sammy Hagar in the Circle, been playing with them for like 20, 25 years. Uh, Brett Tuggle, who played with Lindsey Buckingham, Fleetwood Mac. He played with Rick Springfield. He played with David Lee Roth. We interviewed him because he was actually in a band with David Zychek in the 70s called Head First. So we thought this was just going to be a little project. We'll interview some people, put something out, be great. And it led us all over, pretty much all of the United States to
Hmm.
interview people. And the story that we told, especially my wife, I'm going to give her big time credit because she wrote the script, she did all the research, and she really worked hard for like, I mean, 3 months, 10, 12 hours a day, just
Yeah.
knocking it out. And then we sat down together and we pieced this thing together and edited it and with a lot of tweaking, with anything
Mhm.
like that, there's a lot of tweaking, but we're we're so proud of it and we're so happy that we finally get to show all his fans from Waco because he had a lot of fans in Waco.
Yeah.
And all of the United States, really.
Mhm. Well, it's because I remember even when I started this Fans of Motion page back in March of 2020, I think the video segment that you have with Brad and Kelly, was out even
Yeah.
then because I
Yeah.
remember posting it. So I know you guys have been, working on this for a good amount of time and
Yeah, we started working on it probably a few months after he passed away.
mm,
We started interviewing some people around here and for probably 2 years, we traveled to Colorado, we traveled to San Francisco and to Austin, and we interviewed quite a few people, those
mm.
first 2 years for sure. Yeah.
So what was David's, what where was his first recordings that maybe, his first break at maybe like the big time in the 70s? Where did, I know you mentioned a band Head First. Is
Yeah.
that kind of where
No, they were pretty much a local band. They
local
played
band?
around Denver.
Okay.
They played a lot of cover songs. There are some recordings from back then that we got a hold of. Not video, but some audio recordings. And but that sort of led him into Airborne because Beau Hill had a recording studio in Denver. Yeah, that's the Airborne album.
So,
So
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 yeah,
so the head first stuff wasn't, it wasn't, they weren't, most of the stuff they were doing was cover songs, and they had a few original songs here and there. But that sort of led them to uh, Airborne, which Beau Hill was the producer, and he was in the band. He was in,
yeah,
but he had the recording studio in Denver, and if you want to know more, you got to watch the documentary
yeah.
because that's such a great story. It's a crazy story, also.
Well, and this was, I mean, this isn't something that was, this isn't just a minor record. I mean, one, it's got Beau Hill,
Yeah,
as, guitarist and vocals. Uh, it's on Columbia Records. So
yeah,
this is a
yeah.
major label,
It was a
you
major
know,
label, and it was actually, God, I don't want to give too much away, but I think in 1980, uh, it was picked as one of the top 10 albums or bands to look for in the
okay.
80s.
So I know the record came out in 79. Now, I don't mean any, it could be late 79. I don't know
Yeah, yeah,
when, but, I mean, to where this is the promo version. So, I mean, this is CBS Columbia, uh, and there's old David on the back there.
yeah,
Uh, very well produced record. I mean, you can put it on, and the production and the musicianship is still today top notch.
yeah.
It's kind of hard to maybe pinpoint what, it's rock. It's got a little bit of elements
Well,
of,
it's a little all over the place for
yeah,
sure.
it's
I mean,
got some Boston,
yeah,
uh,
some
some
Yes, some Bad Company. It's got a lot
yeah,
of,
some little bit of Electric Light Orchestra. There's some orchestra, stuff, some rock orchestra,
it's
but
got everything in it for sure.
yeah, and there is a Night Ranger connection, you know, on top of the David Zychek is this was produced by Keith Olsen, who also produced 9 years later produced the Night Ranger Man in Motion record, which was the last record in that classic era of the
Yeah, yeah.
80s. But yeah,
Yeah,
so
we had the opportunity to interview Keith Olsen. This was in 2020, I think. Right up at the time COVID hit, and my wife had talked to him on the phone a few times, and were planning to go interview him. But then soon after that, before we could ever get down there, he
yeah,
passed
yeah,
away. So
unfortunately passed away. Yeah.
yeah.
And I mean, I think, Irving Azoff, Eagles and all that stuff, I think
Hmm.
he had, at least something to do with this management wise or
Yeah, yeah.
something. So,
A lot of big names were associated with that record back in the
and
day for sure. And it's crazy that it never, pardon the pun, but took off, you know.
yeah, and
Yeah.
and it's, and what's, what I think about is there's thousands of these stories,
Yeah.
right? And what's great is, David had someone like you and your wife to tell his story because, not everybody, has that. And I don't think they ever produced a second record, correct?
No, well, they recorded about 70, probably close to 70 songs for
Really?
what they call the Dig Two. And I guess that sat on the shelf forever until just a few years ago, and they put some stuff out. It's called the Dig Two, and yeah, it sounds great too, man. It's
Yeah.
awesome.
I mean, I guess, it's just hard to find information, about that
Yeah.
band. I was able to get on eBay over the last couple of weeks. I did find a promo 45 that's out there. I guess I just realized it was a promo, just pulling it out here.
I've never
Uh,
seen that before. That's pretty
um,
cool.
but yeah, there's, so, they had, you know, major record label and, push. And did you ever get to talk to David on, why, because that's always an interesting story, I think, is, you get to be in the best recording studios with these top-notch, producers and everything else, and the album doesn't, take off, so to speak, and suddenly it's not there. Did you ever get to talk to him about that and how that
Well,
impacted it?
when we interviewed him in 2015, he talked about that, but there's so much more to that story that that's part of why we had to make a documentary. I mean, there's 20 minutes just on Airborne
Really?
because it's a crazy story, you
Yeah,
know. It's a crazy story. So I mean, I
there you
couldn't
go.
get into it here because I mean, yeah,
Yeah. Well,
it's a good chunk of the documentary, and it's a
that's
great,
good. That's good that it's covered. And
yeah.
um because I mean, like I said, if you guys get a chance, I don't think you can stream it, but you can find, like I said, when I went and looked on eBay, to see what was out there, that 45 was maybe $10. And I do know there's copies of the record that were at least under 20. I don't think they were anything too crazy. So, um,
Yeah, you
I'm,
can't find it on Spotify or anything. I've looked because there's another
yeah,
band called Airborne, you know.
yes,
So
yes,
when you search Airborne, you get some other band.
uh,
So I mean, you can find it on YouTube. You can go on YouTube, type in if you type in David Zychek
yes.
Airborne, you will find this album and some of the Dig 2 stuff.
Okay. Yeah, I do know the album's on YouTube. And that other Airborne band is really good. There's a great song called Running Wild. It's kind of like Australian.
Yeah, I
When
remember they
they're,
were on the radio
yeah,
probably 20 years ago, maybe.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so so where does David Zychek go after, Airborne? Is it back to Texas? Does he do any
Comes
work?
back, yeah, he comes back to Texas. He has a band called the Groove Kings, and I think that was pretty much his, that's where he sort of like, you know, That's where he was for the majority of the 80s and into the 90s, I think. And he had some other projects going on. He was always doing something. But that was the Groove Kings was the band that they had actually formed in the 70s, and then he moved to Colorado, and then the airborne thing happened. He came back to Texas, got the Groove Kings back together. And there's some pretty interesting and crazy stories about the Groove Kings also.
So is he doing so? I mean, we're leading up into Night Ranger. I guess, obviously, you know, what's it, David Prater is the one that's going to be end up producing feeding off the mojo, and I know him and David were friends.
Yeah.
Where does David and I guess Prater and Zychek kind of where are they at in the 80s? Are they working together at all? But where does
Oh, they knew each other. David Prater met Zychek, I think, right after Zychek graduated high
y-
school. So he was playing locally in Temple, and Prater knew David from,
mm,
well, since they were 18, 19, 20 years old. And then he was in a band with David in the early 70s. So he knew David
way
forever.
back? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So was David still, because as far as my knowledge is, Zychek kind of enters the picture 94 when Night Ranger is starting to record um the feeding off the Mojo record. And I know some of it is recorded, I think in Austin,
Yeah. Yeah.
Texas.
They recorded it in Austin. I don't know
So,
why, but that's just that's where it happened.
well, I know the record was originally started, maybe not originally, but I know they started recording some of it in Colorado. And I think they started recording some out in California. And then
Yeah.
the third attempt was um, in Austin. So where does, what can you tell us about the David Zychek and Night Ranger era?
Well, I think Prater he needed some help. This is what he said in the documentary. He needed some help arranging this, the music for this. And they needed somebody to play some guitar parts. And I think he even played some bass on it. So David or Prater, what did this way? Prater calls Zacek and say, "Hey, will you help me do this record?" And that's sort of how he got involved with the making of this record. And then uh, when they were going to go on tour, they were like, Prater was like, "Well, David, you've recorded these songs. You can play every instrument in the world. Why don't you go on the road with Night Ranger?" So that's what he did. He toured with Night Ranger. And what's really cool is when they played Waco, they played at the Hippodrome. It's an old theater downtown. And that's where we're premiering the documentary on November 12th.
Okay.
The same place where they played in Waco with Zacek. So I
Mm.
thought that's pretty cool.
And it's a record that, I mean, it's the height of grunge.
Hmm.
So that record didn't see, a lot of attention.
Yeah.
Obviously, Jack Blades wasn't on that record. It was, like I said, Gary Moon on bass and vocals, but it's a fantastic record. I remember talking to Prater, and I think he was saying something like Zychek was maybe just a little hesitant to go out with him,
Yeah, yeah.
and he
He
kind of
didn't
had
want
to,
to do it. He didn't
yeah,
want to do it. That's what he said. He didn't want to do it. And he said, yeah, but I guess he
yeah.
changed his mind. Yeah.
Prater had to, like, basically tell him, get your ass out there and do it.
Yeah.
And um yeah, so it's a record that, I mean, just last month I was, I had it in, my truck's got a great sound system and was playing it for someone, and I'm still always amazed just how fresh it sounds. The production on it's great. And
Well, Prater's a great producer.
yes, um, probably some stuff that you guys would know out there if you're watching or listening is he produced the first two Firehouse records,
Yeah.
Dream Theater, Images and Words, A record that I really liked, I thought had great production, great sound, was a band called Arcade. That was Stephen Pearcy's band right after Ratt. Um, and then, like, my first time becoming aware of David Zychek, and again, this is back when there's no internet, or
Yeah,
not everybody had, hardly anybody had it, but it's definitely no social media or anything. So, Night Ranger, June of or July of '95. I'd seen them in September of '93. They were still a three piece, but in July of '95, me and a few friends went to see them in Columbus, Ohio, and they come out on stage, and there's this fourth guy out there.
yeah,
And after the show, I got to meet him and got my picture taken with him, and got to meet him the next day, which I think that's some of the photos I sent you.
yeah,
Um, and the album then was released in October of that year. And so if you go through the credits, obviously you got Kelly, Brad, and Gary, but if you go through the additional musicians, it's right there. David Zychek, additional guitars, maybe vocals. Uh, and then I saw him a couple times in December of that year. And uh, yeah, so and then I think he continued, I know they did that Mojo tour up until about the early April of '96, and I think he was with them that that entire period. So you
yeah.
know
It's a shame nobody had any video. You
the
know,
yes, I mean
there is no video of
no.
I can find or anybody knows about.
The only video that there is of that era is there is this of and it doesn't contain Zychek from '95. This is from '91, but it's Gary Moon, Brad, and Kelly. There's a very small amount of footage from a Houston charity event, and there is very little snippets in a Brad interview that comes from Japan. So no video that I know of
Yeah.
from the Zychek era. There is that
I'm sure
one.
some I'm sure some will after this comes out, people are like, oh hey, I have some video of Night Ranger from '95. I'm like, well, it's a little too late now.
Yes, there
That's
is.
what'll happen.
There is one recording from Night Ranger, New Jersey, 1995 that I may have sent you maybe his guitar solo
Yeah,
from.
yeah,
But like I said, just it's just right before, back then a camcorder is the size of a Datsun,
yeah,
and you couldn't really sneak those in. So unfortunately, there's not
yeah.
a lot out there, but it's a record in the Night Ranger community that definitely has a cult following. It's now you have that fan page, the Fans of Motion page on Facebook. All the fans of that record can come together and they're always sharing songs from that record and how much they enjoy it. And I think now that it's been 30 years, the days of, well, I don't like that record because this person's not on it or something. Now people can just kind of enjoy it for the music and what it is. And um, yeah, it's great that you tell the story and that we get to,
Yeah, Night Ranger is just a little chunk
yeah.
of his of his life story, the ups and downs of his life story, and we're we're so proud of the documentary. And I know a lot of people have been waiting to see it because we get messages. We get messages all the time. When's it coming
Yeah.
out? Where can we see it? When's it coming out? Where? And well, now it's going to come out.
So now we got the premiere coming up. Z, the story of David Zychek. So number one, if you're out there, they got a Facebook page where you can go and get all the updates. Just type in, Z story of David Zychek. Um, and I'll put a link somewhere where you can grab that. But so let's talk about this premiere you got coming up on November 12th, 2024. Let's talk about, you know, you guys finishing this project and how you guys are getting ready to, premiere this to the world.
Well, we're excited, and the Hippodrome is the place to show it in Waco because it's an old theater. It's probably over 100 years old. And like I said earlier, this is where when David toured with Night Ranger, that's where they played in Waco. And so I think that's a cool full circle coming back from the Night Ranger days. And it was hard to find a date where everybody was sort of available, or most people are available, to so it's a November 12th, Tuesday night. It's at 6. Doors open at 6, show opens it starts at 7. Uh, Tickets are on sale if you're interested. If you go to hippodromewaco.com or just Google, Hippodrome Waco, it should pop up. And tickets are $20. That's
And
about
then,
normal price for a movie, especially
mm,
this movie. This is a great movie. And then after the show, we're gonna have a big jam party celebration at the backyard, which is a sort of an outdoor music venue. That's uh, a friend of ours, Brian Brown, who's a local musician who's actually in the documentary too. He's part owner of that, so he's letting us sort of like take it from the Hippodrome to the backyard. We have about 10 to 12 songs from the documentary that we're going to get people up on stage and have a jam session. We have a house band with Johnny Big, Jonathan Coots, who are also Ted Nugent's sort of local, sometimes touring, bass and guitar or bass and drums. I mean, so they're going to be sort of the house band, and throughout the night we'll get different musicians. Deborah Jones is going to be there. We have Kirk Tatum, who's in Deep Blue Something. He wrote a song for the Deborah Jones era of David Zychek, so he's going to get up there and jam a song. Uh, I'm gonna get up there and play an acoustic song with my daughter, and so it's gonna be a fun and emotional night for sure.
definitely. And like I said, if get a chance, check out the trailer for the documentary. I mean, you got David Prater, Nugent, Beau Hill, Vic Johnson, uh, Brett Tuggle, who I think
Yeah,
you said was with Fleetwood Mac and Lindsey Buckingham, and
yeah.
a host of others. And then if you are going to be close to Waco, Texas, November 12th, the Hippodrome, and then you said afterwards you got the um,
It's a big party. So
party.
if you do come to call in sick the next day or take the next day off because yeah,
Um, and it is like you said, it's I mean, why a Tuesday night? Well, I mean, most of the people, that are involved with the document. I mean, they're touring musicians, and when do you tour?
exactly. A lot of them are local musicians too
Yeah,
that are they're still playing.
yeah,
They were friends with David from forever and played with David in different bands and or what just jam sessions or whatever. So yeah, we couldn't get a Friday or Saturday. It was just too hard to do because everybody had something going on. So,
yeah.
but it's just a
Def
day. It doesn't matter. I mean,
and
if you love David, and I know there's so many people around here did,
mm.
they're gonna show up.
And if you're able to, I mean, if you're listening to this because of the Night Ranger aspect, obviously, if you are able to make it, I mean, go and represent Night Ranger. Wear your Night Ranger shirt
There
and,
you go.
I
Yeah.
mean, be the face of the band we all enjoy because I want to go, but again, I'm on the other side of the country. It's kind of hard for me to do that. And
Mhm.
um I know, Brad and Kelly want to go, but again, that's right when everything's kicking back up for them. And uh, so we're going to rely on some of you guys out there to,
Yeah, we're
you
gonna
know,
jam a Night Ranger song at the after
uh,
party for sure
so,
too. So
and you said it's going to be obviously emotional. I mean, just for the fact that, it's David's story, but I mean, heck, you and your wife probably been working on this close to 8 years.
we've been working on it 8 years, and I mean, really, up until recently. it was hard to watch some stuff because he passed away in 2016, and the last 15 minutes of the documentary, it's just it gets you choked up for sure. I can finally watch it. We've only watched it like two,
Yeah.
300 times, over and over and over. So it's different now, but the small group, because we've had some I guess you would say test audiences with some of our friends and people that knew David, and yeah, everybody's they have tears in their eyes at the end of it
Yeah.
because it's a great story. Uh, and it does get a little emotional toward the end. So it's going to be,
Yeah.
yeah, we might need to get some tissues.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those things too. I mean, it's just, you don't really have where I've known, David Zychek as a fan for 30 years. Um, it's not something have to have been a fan. You could be watching this now as a Night Ranger fan and, just on the human level,
If you
you know,
like music and you like documentaries and you like great stories,
this,
this is the documentary for you. I'll give you a quick example. So we had some friends come over a couple of weeks ago to show the documentary to sort of our test audience. My wife, one of my wife's friends, who's from France, my wife is from France. Her friend came over. She's from France. She knew nothing about David Zychek. She's probably not that into music, but at the end of the documentary, she was bawling. She was it, it was so emotional for her, the story and the whole end of it, especially.
mm,
And she was so touched by the documentary that the next day she went on eBay and bought that Airborne album she showed a while ago.
that's,
So,
yeah.
I mean,
So,
that
mhm.
just it made us feel good.
Now following the Facebook page as I have for the last few years, I noticed, there's a little, thing on there maybe a month or so ago where you guys filled in a tiny gap, you said. What was that? It looked like who was that interview with?
Well, the most recent interview was Kirk Tatum, who who was in the band Deep Blue Something. I don't know if you remember the song Breakfast at
Yep.
Tiffany's. He actually lives in Dallas. So he we interviewed him because he wrote a song. Well, he has a bunch of songs, and he had
Mhm.
sent David. I guess David, he knew David from back in the day, and so David called him and said, "Hey, I need a song. You have any songs? And he was like, "Yeah, yeah." He goes, "Let me send you some stuff." So he sent him some stuff. So that's probably the gap you're talking about.
Well, the one that I was referring to was um, this post right there.
Oh, that's my daughter. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. She recorded when she was 8 or 9, 10 or 10, something like that. We She went to the studio and recorded Walking on Sunshine.
All right.
So she has a uh, little part in the documentary. So
That's
yeah, we wanted to get her in there, and she's the one I'm going to sing. We're going to sing a song, hopefully,
mm.
if everything goes.
So, and then I saw this just maybe today or yesterday, um, and was posted by Brian Brown.
Yeah,
Uh,
he's one of the owners of the backyard, and he's in the documentary. He played with David Zychek. They actually had a band for a little while called Bracek.
mm. So I thought I'd read this. I thought it was just, a kind of a good summary as he posted on the documentary page. Dave is a hero, mentor, legend, motivator, peer, and above all, a great friend. I'm beyond proud of the tireless efforts and ultimate result produced by Troy and Anna Shaw. On their own dime and time, amidst struggles, pushback, dead ends, fading memories, and a host of other speed bumps, they managed to put together an amazing and well-deserved tribute to a true icon. I hope you guys can make it out and support this literal passion project I'm proud to be involved in on a minor level and moved on a major level. Great job. So, I just thought that was kind of a good review or whatever you want to say.
Yeah, that definitely it makes us feel good for sure.
Mm,
It makes it all worth it when you can get somebody like Brian,
mm,
David, longer than and recorded albums out there at his studio, and knew David longer than I knew
yeah,
David. So to have him say something like that on Facebook for the world to see and his
mm,
fans to see it, it definitely, you know,
yeah.
it makes us feel good for sure.
Well, like I said, my paths didn't cross much with David, but as a 18-year-old kid being a Night Ranger nut, he was always cool with me, took the time to talk to me.
He was the nicest guy. Like everybody was his friend. He would talk to anybody at any show. If he was up there tuning his guitar, setting his pedals up or whatever, and you went up and talked to him, he would always take a minute to talk to you. I mean, he was probably one of the nicest guys you'd ever know. Never said a bad thing about anybody ever. And Brian, I think Brian, I don't know if Brian says that in the documentary, but he did in the interview. He goes, he was the nicest guy, never had a bad word to say about anybody ever.
Yeah. And I
And
know,
that's part of the story, how
yeah,
nice of a guy he was, and probably too nice, and maybe got, you know, screwed
yeah,
over on some, situations and business deals.
yeah. And I know just talking a few days ago on the phone with Kelly, Kelly had just, yeah, brought this up to him that, I was having you on, and, he immediately talked about how nice and great of a guy, David was. And,
Yeah.
without really me prompting or anything, it's just, hey, I'm doing this interview with, the guy that's doing the Zychek thing. And he just immediately kind of went into how, you know, nice and kind that David was. So listen, November 12th, Waco, Texas. Night Ranger fans, if you can show up, be there. Go to the Facebook page. I'll put a link in the comments, but it's the story of David Zychek. And I would say, I guess, on the behalf of the Night Ranger community and just with people who just like to hear great stories and documentaries, thank you for doing this on behalf of David and telling his story and getting it out there. And it's come November 12th, it's out there and it's out there forever, and that's good for him.
Yeah, yeah. Go to the Facebook page, like the Facebook page. We'll keep you updated with any information, even after the premiere. We'll have it available to download, and we've been accepted into some film festivals. So I mean, the word's getting out, and we're definitely we're both my wife and I are just so proud, and I'm very proud of the work she did because
Hmm.
I couldn't have done what I did without her because she did most of the legwork on this thing by you know, listening to every interview, transcribing every interview, doing the research, making sure everything is legit, because some people's memories fade and they might say something and it's like, well, that didn't sound about right. You do some research and find out, well, they weren't exactly, the year
You,
might have been a little two or three or whatever off, but she did it all. I mean,
yes.
90% of this story is from her.
Or
So I just want to give her kudos for sure.
there, if you are in Waco for this, make sure you find Anna and buy her a drink and give her a pat on the back.
There you go. Well, we'll be there. We got the red car. We're gonna have the red carpet laid out. Uh, yeah,
All right.
it's gonna be the place to be in Waco on November 12th for sure. So
Well, Troy, I appreciate you joining us. And keep us informed of your next project and wherever this project may even go,
yeah,
after this. I mean, there could be more film festivals. I know, just remember on the page, like Hawaii and Melbourne. And I think when we
yeah,
were talking on the phone, maybe Nashville. So,
yeah.
um,
I think 4 or 5 film festivals so far. Now with COVID, when COVID hit in 2020, a lot of these film festivals went online. So that's a lot of them still are that way.
Mm,
So, but yeah, I mean, we could
yeah,
by the time you release this, I mean, maybe we could have gotten some more film
yeah,
festivals and stuff. So you never know.
yeah,
That's what's exciting. We don't know where this is going to take us. I mean, we didn't even know it was going to take us when we started it. You know, eight
yeah.
years. We had no idea it would take us to places we went, and where we are now. So it's pretty exciting.
Well, definitely keep us updated on, any events after November 12th. And again, thank you for joining us and thank you for telling Dave's story.
All right. Thanks for having me, man.
You have potential. Crying so can be heard. It's not absurd. Experience essential.